Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henrik Bick. I'm here with the communications team at the Music Business Association. Happy to welcome you all to the first of many in our fall 2021 webinar series. I hope you all had a great summer. Hope it was productive, relaxing, whatever you needed it to be, and hope you all are staying safe through the ongoing pandemic. Before we get started today, and before I introduce our presenter, founder and CEO of Byta, Marc Brown, just have a couple of quick housekeeping notes for some music biz related events coming up. First up is our Metadata Summit. It's going to be happening in a couple weeks time, October 5th through 7th via our Socio events platform. We're very excited to have announced the program today, the preliminary program, with all the topics that our experts in the metadata field are going to be covering. Everything from matching collaborator data to publishing data, addressing issues in the UGC community, working with new communities of creators. Anything you can think of that's metadata related, we'll be covering it. You can find out more information about the program and register via our website. It's right on the homepage, musicbiz.org. Speaking of musicbiz.org, you'll also find preliminary information for next year's annual conference. We are hopeful that we'll be able to host you all at the JW Marriott Nashville next May for Music Biz 2022. Information on that can be found at musicbiz2022.com or via our website, as I said, and be sure to follow us on socials as well, at musicbizassoc on all of our platforms. Just a reminder for all the Music Biz members in the crowd, we do have a special benefit for you all that we'd love for you to take advantage of if you can. It's our mental health fund. Via the Empower section of our website, you'll be able to sign up for essential mental health services if you've had any trouble struggling with finances through the COVID-19 pandemic. It's important to be keeping up on mental health no matter what, but especially in this incredibly trying time. And we want to, as always, thank our partners in the Music Health Alliance and the SCARS Foundation for helping to make this possible. And as I said, just one last little reminder, you can find out more information about everything coming up from Music Biz, our upcoming slate of webinars, our future events, and everything else via our website and via our socials, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at musicbizassoc. So now, here to present the findings from their music sharing survey that was conducted earlier this summer. Happy to welcome Marc Brown, the founder and CEO of Byta. And just so y'all know, to interact with one another, be sure to use your chat function. And to ask any questions during the session, use the dedicated Q&A box. Thanks again, Marc, for being here. Take it away.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Henrik. Thanks, Music Biz, for having us. Let me just share my screen. There we go. Let's see if anybody needs me. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but otherwise I'm just going to present. So get in touch if there's any issues. So yes, I'm the founder and CEO of Byta, and we're going to talk today about the state of music sharing, which is the first. I guess that's a good thing to be the first of this new series of Music Business Common Ground webinar series. So byta.com if you want to check it out. I'm going to talk a bit about a bit about our company, and then we'll get into the details of our white paper. So I'm Marc Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Byta. I'm Canadian. I lived in the UK for ages, and now I live in Stockholm, Sweden, where I'm sitting right now. Like most of you, I have a long history in the music business. I started at a small independently run label in the on the East Coast of Canada in the 90s, long before anything was digital. Artist run label called Murder Records. Let me just check the chat here. There we go. Okay, great. Then I moved to the UK, where I worked in the A&R department at Creation Records, Oasis, Super Furry Animals, Primal Scream, Teenage Fan Club. Then I moved and worked at another label run by the founder of Creation called Pop Tones. And then it was there that I started doing radio promotion, which I did for 14 years under my own banner of 4 But then it was right around the end of that time that I was a radio plugger that there was this transition from CDs to digital. And that's where I came up with the idea for Byta. And that's when I moved to Sweden. So what is Byta? Byta is the platform that enables sending and receiving of digital audio in a clean, simple, and secure way. And that's built for everyone working with music today. So what makes Byta unique? Well, we take advantage of audiophile's unique properties. We read and write file metadata. We allow file conversions on the fly, and we have fast yet secure streaming. Last year, we raised a couple $1 million in seed funding from this organization called the Canadian Media Fund in Canada. There's an article that went out in TechCrunch. And as you can see, that's the old version of our platform. We just launched a redesign back in August. So what is our mission statement? Well, our goal is to provide artists and their teams with the tools and the knowledge to move their careers forward. So the key here is tools, Byta for sending and receiving digital audio. But we also really want to make sure that we deliver knowledge to people, be this artists or people who work at labels, about what we know best. And that's anything around music sharing. And what form does this knowledge take? Well, we have this sister site, howwelisten.org, which is actually a nonprofit organization, which started out of this idea that we wanted to interview people about how they find, listen, and experience new music. And so it started as a weekly interview series, and now it's expanded into loads of other things, including these types of events. So here is a classic, one of the interviews that ran really early. I don't know if anybody knows Amber. I'm sure you do. She's Australian. She was living in LA for years. Now I think she's back in Australia. But she sort of sums up what How We Listen is, at least for me. This idea that you're looking at basically at a spreadsheet of words that play music, no branding, no imaging, no story. And she goes on. What she's talking about here is she's talking about Spotify. And she's highlighting what we feel, and especially me, feels a massive challenge, that it's easy to get your music on Spotify or Apple Music or Deezer, but what are the next steps after that? Just because you can get it there doesn't mean people are listening. So today, I'm going to give a little background on how we came to develop this white paper. I'm going to talk about the methodology, including introducing Johnny Sullivan, who did all of the research. We're going to discuss the key findings so far, because it's still being written. And then I'm going to give you a bit of a summary at the end. So back to what sort of Amber was highlighting. This idea that this quote is from August 2020, 40,000 songs are uploaded to Spotify daily. As I'm sure you all know, this figure has actually gone up about 3 months ago. I think Daniel Eck from Spotify said that it's now 60,000 tracks a day, which is crazy. So the whole point is this idea of pre-release music discovery. A lot of you know, we all get a lot of links, files moving back and forth. And why is that happening? We're receiving those because senders are looking for support. They're looking to reach out to people, build a story well in advance of release. And if they don't share that music, they get less support. But this is where it gets challenging. This is my friend Chris Price, who's the head of music at Radio 1 in the UK. And I love this quote because it says a lot. The digital world is way better, ultimately, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm sure most of any of you that would remember CDs would agree that it's much easier to find one CD in a stack of 100 CDs than it is to find one track digitally in a series of emails and links. So this is no different for someone like Chris. We all have to deal with this kind of stuff. And I generally talk about this with artists, but I think it says a lot for what we all do. And this is a simple map. This is quite a few years old now. I'm probably 2017, but I still give it out when I do artist talks, because I do find that a lot of them don't understand just how intricate the music business is. This would be very natural to all of us, but to someone new walking into the music ecosystem, they think it's crazy. So there's all these decentralized points where music is flying back and forth, and that could be streams, that could be downloads. And for most people, this is a very confusing world. But even though that's the case, we've come to realize, we realized a couple of years ago, that no other studies on the music sharing space have ever been done. So how could this be such an important part of the recording and release project process and be overlooked? So if anybody's heard of any research, I'd love to know, but we've never really found any. So I don't know if any of you know Shawn Reynaldo. His newsletter, First Floor, is amazing. So what happened about maybe a year ago, we started reading his newsletter and we got in touch with him, and he's a super nice guy. And we started chatting with him. He writes for Pitchfork and loads of different sites and publications. And he was telling us about, he wanted to write a couple articles about this problem, this idea that, you know, it's the digital world is hard to deal with if you work in and around music. And so out of that came this idea to do a 3-part series, which he's written and which I believe we announced today, about metadata storage and sharing for people who work with music. And it's called Digital Blues, and it's going to be a 3-part series. I can't remember when the first one's going out, but I'll make sure I get it to you all. So these are a personal narrative about these challenges that we're talking about, that I've highlighted, that Amber's mentioned. And this is a really good quote, because I think you're all going to agree with this. Most music professionals have their own preferences when it comes to sending and receiving files, but the landscape is so varied that fluency in multiple platforms has become a mandatory aspect of the job. It's exactly what I experienced, and I'm sure it's what you experience. But what happened is, we realized no matter how much a lot of this information was intuitive for us, the most important thing is, if we really wanted to look into this, we would have to do some proper research and writing our own narratives about how things work from our perspective. Though super interesting from Shawn's view, wasn't as sort of heavy on the data side as we wanted to be. So we came across Dr. Johnny Sullivan. Johnny, are you somewhere to be found? Can you magically make yourself appear?
Hey, here I am.
Hey, there you are. How's it going? Wow, like magic. So yeah, so we did. What happened was, when was this, Johnny? This was about a year ago. Did we start talking?
Time, or maybe the end of the winter. I forget exactly, okay. But yeah, call it March or thereabouts.
And so we had this idea to do a proper white paper on music sharing. And then why don't you tell everybody what your background is and what you've been doing? Because you just finished your PhD, right?
Yeah, correct. Cool. Yeah, well, Mark and Music Biz, thanks for having me here. Yeah, so I just finished my PhD in music technology, where my research was based around the design and evaluation of performance technologies. So new hardware and software instruments and modes of performance is basically what I worked on. So a lot of design, but really the foundation of my research was user research. And the reason that I got into that, and also the reason that I was sort of interested in this white paper project, is my background is all music. I started with a degree in jazz guitar early on, played professionally for a decade or so, and then eventually sort of got moved into technology more and more, and then, you know, eventually got really into research. So when I heard about this project, when I was approached for it, I found it to be really cool because I can, you know, use some of the user research methods that I'm familiar with now. But it's also deals with a lot of stuff that I encountered in my own music career in terms of, you know, sharing and getting stuff out of there and some of the bottlenecks. So I'll give just sort of a quick walkthrough of the survey and also how the analysis was put together, just at kind of a high level. So we're talking about the basic methodology that we went with is a mixed methods approach. So this combines quantitative and qualitative aspects. So the quantitative is, it's numerical data on the survey. It's questions with, multiple choice answers, things like that, that are easily quantifiable and, built into graphs and stuff. So this can give you a nice sort of basic overview lay of the land. But we wanted to mix that with qualitative analysis too. So the qualitative analysis methods come from humanities and social sciences and anthropology as well, which help capture a bit more of the nuances and the context and the sort of personal experiences of the survey population that you might want to reach. And then, so very specifically, the methods that we are working with is called explanatory sequential mixed methods, which combines the two. It's explanatory and sequential because first we looked at the quantitative data to sort of give us the big picture. And then we went into the qualitative to sort of break it down a little bit more and try to get some nuanced detail out of the results that we have. And so the qualitative parts are looking back at the quantitative to sort of explain some of the trends that we originally saw.
Okay, cool. So then next, this is about, why don't you tell us a bit about who it went out to and all that kind of stuff, how it was distributed?
Yeah, so so the first question was, like, what is our survey population? Who are we interested in? And it's a huge number, right? Because we're talking about, musicians and artists, and basically, anyone that works in the music industry worldwide in these roles that are sharing digital audio. So we estimated that to be somewhere between 20 and 40 million people. The survey was sent out to a bunch of associations in different parts of the world. The list I have here was like Canadian Music Association, European, Australian, UK, including
Music Biz, yeah.
So I won't go through the whole list, but we sent them out to several organizations. The estimated reach numbers I have here were about somewhere between 5,000 or 6,000 people were contacted directly, and probably estimated another 10,000 were contacted peripherally through social media, email lists, things like that.
Okay, and then results.
So then results, just to finish off the numbers portion of those that went out, we got over 300 surveys were responded to. 284 were actually valid surveys that were completed all the way through. And
so you throw away, just to be clear, you throw away any surveys that aren't 100% completed, correct?
Any surveys that that were half completed or left. Also threw out a couple that were just sort of gibberish, anything like that. And so we were left with 284 valid surveys that we counted, and this represented around 5% of the response rate from those that we contacted directly. So then in survey methodologies, there's kind of these three interconnected variables that are important just to mention. This is a little bit more important for the quantitative side, the numerical side. And so they're interrelated. So we have the sample size, and then based on your total population and the sample size that you get back of the completed data, you can calculate the confidence level and the margin of error, which are both within the sort of standard industry practices. A confidence level of 95% and a margin error based on our sample size came out to be 6%.
So and so just so everybody understands, because I learned a lot of this stuff on the go. The confidence level is what? Confidence in the accuracy of that it represents the population?
Confidence in the accuracy. So basically, if you ran this same survey 100 times, 95 of those surveys would give you basically the same results.
Okay, and then the margin of error.
And then the margin of error is for any number that we spit back. We'll get into a couple of the charts, but if we say 87% said this, the margin of error means that the actual real correct number is within 6% one side or the other of that. So okay. If I said 87%, it would be somewhere within the true actual answer is between 81% and 93%. Okay. And so the industry standards for these things, for running statistics, is 95% confidence level, margin of error between 1 and 10%, usually around 5%. So all of which is to say the numbers that we had put us right in that sweet spot.
Okay, perfect. Because I read, a fair amount of white papers, and I've never really known this kind of stuff before. So it's super helpful for me, especially reading other material. So I appreciate that. So let's keep going. Oh yeah, what's this one? Sorry, I forgot about this one.
So then this is just a little bit of then how did we put the survey together? What was in it, and how does that sort of map back to this mixed methods analysis? So there were kind of three parts. The survey questionnaire itself was mainly close-ended survey questions, which was, demographics, backgrounds, things like that, and a lot of questions around practices that were, multiple choice or, importance ratings, things like that on a scale of 1 to 5. How do you rate, security or these other things? I think Marc will mention this in a little bit. So that was where we got all of this quantitative data. Then we did have just a very few open-ended survey questions where the respondents could actually, write in their text answers. And so the analysis of this was the qualitative analysis, where basically we got all the questions back, went through and sort of categorized all the responses a few different times so we could pull out these kind of high-level themes that several people, would talk about and sort of understand, like a lot of people care about X, Y, or Z. And then after the survey, we identified several participants to conduct follow-up interviews. So we developed a short interview questionnaire of about 5 or 6 questions. Marc actually did the interviews, and then I analyzed the results of that. And this, again, that gave us this qualitative, like very nuanced, very detailed, sort of personalized understanding of, what some of these larger trends mean that we got in the quantitative part of the analysis.
Okay, cool. So, but yeah, I'm going to start going into a bit of it here, but do you want to stay there in case I have any questions for you? Because I'm sure I'm going to forget something.
You got it. I'll be right here.
So the stage that we're in now is Johnny has analyzed all the data, and Shawn, who wrote those articles, is now actually writing the white papers. So we've had 2 or 3 working meetings where we've digested all of the data, and all these graphs are from Johnny's work. And so we'll make sure we get everybody a copy of the white paper when it's released next month. But what I wanted to do was go through what we all thought were the most interesting sort of high-level talking points. And this here, the reason I wanted to talk about this one quickly is this is respondents identified roles. I felt that this represents what my view of the music ecosystem is like, that there are substantially more artists and much less people supporting them. So I felt that, Johnny's explained how the level of confidence of what the actors, I was very impressed that it looked exactly like I expect the music ecosystem to look. But this I thought was fascinating. You'll see a quote here on the left from a survey respondent, but this quote mirrors what I see on the right, this idea that respondents selecting how many different roles they have in music. And a lot of, you'll see in a couple of the other graphs that artists plus other, they do a lot of other jobs. And so this respondent said it's sort of a mishmash, because this, especially today, you have to be available, a little bit of this, a little bit of that to make it. And I think that is very true, very true. But I lament the people who are in 5+ roles, who represented 2% of respondents. But now into sort of the more music sharing detailed information. 4.8 is the average number of services respondents reported using, and you can see this on the right. So there's total services. They're divided by artist and other roles, artists who have other roles, and non-artist. And then it's broken down into 3 free services and paid services. And again, for me, when I look at this, I think to myself, oh, that makes sense. People use a lot more platforms than they think just off the top of their head. So it was very interesting to me to get a number. But then here we go. If we look even broader and spread it out, we can see that where are we there? Between 4 and 5 here in the middle. there's still people who are saying they use 13 different platforms. But even if you look at 7 different, that's for non-artists. So probably people who work mostly in music, like in the music business, traditional music business. So I thought it was really interesting, and we'll see it in a couple other of the results, how you look at something high level, and then once you dig down even more, it becomes even more nuanced. But then again, here, another quote, we would use all those services depending on what we're doing and what artists we're working with. If we could use just one, fantastic. But yeah, but the world just really isn't doing that. I think it's, again, such a well-articulated quote about what this graphic is showing. Okay, into more sending and receiving. And I think, again, this is where it gets really interesting. So most respondents send and receive. As you can see on the left-hand side, you know, everybody's doing a lot of sending and receiving. Then receive only, I think that makes sense. Non-artists, a lot of people in the music industry, traditional industry, maybe that could be media or people at labels, they're receiving a lot because those artists are getting in touch with them, they're reaching out. And then you can see the spread, send only, neither. But again, starting to dig down even more, I think this is where it gets super, super, super interesting. So people have preferences. And if we refer back to those How We Listen interviews, that's one of the things we like people to talk about each week, how they find and listen to music, because everybody has a very nuanced view. And I found it very interesting that going through the results and the data, that there is data to show that people have nuanced views and personal preferences. So if we look here, preferences for streamer downloads, senders have preferences about what they want to use. So 36% of senders get the recipients to choose, but 37% of them send only streams. That's correct? Is it only? That's what they selected, right, Johnny?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So then on the other side, though, which one would think might be even more important, is that receivers definitely have preferences. You know, they want to decide. But moving on, it gets even more nuanced. And Johnny, I'll get you to give your perspective on this to make sure I've got it right. So artists deal in downloads. That makes sense because they're making music, they're collaborating, they're swapping stems and mixes back and forth. But then when you get into other roles, streams increase. And then again, non-artists, so people who aren't creating music, would be the highest. So even though here you see certain preferences, it gets even more detailed depending on the role. Is that how you read it, Johnny?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, in terms of sort of getting into the details of reading this data, I found it to be really important, if you'll just flip back to that previous slide one more time, that just from a really high, quick level, you can say, oh, it makes sense. Senders prefer streams, receivers prefer downloads. If you go to the next slide, then you see immediately that's not exactly the case. You know, it seems like artists, receivers prefer the downloads, whereas perhaps non-artists are a little more even or even prefer streams. And so there was this quote that was in the just the analysis working doc that we keep sort of popping up. The choice of platforms is highly personal and context driven. And I think we've just come back to that over and over reading these results.
Yeah, no, I find this stuff is amazing to actually see. Again, the way I look at all this is, and especially I think all you in the audience, we're probably used to thinking it is a certain way, and it is fascinating to see it in numbers for sure, because I would assume certain things, but then to see it actually mapped out is amazing. So here we go. This is sort of the one key takeaway from all this sending and receiving, which I find most interesting. So Johnny sort of highlighted the streams or downloads thing, but only 25% of that should be senders, I believe, right, Johnny? So only 25% of senders prefer to let receivers choose. Is that correct? The middle point. You're on mute.
I would have to look at the slide again. I believe that's the receivers, only a very small percentage want to be able to choose, whereas the senders prefer more choice, but I'm not actually sure without looking at the graph.
Okay. Well, that'll be in the final thing. But what I found fascinating is that there was a disconnect when we talked about it a lot. How it felt like senders, because if we go back and look, so senders here, they prefer to send streams, but then certain recipients want downloads. So this gets into this whole idea that you're trying to get people to listen to your music, and if there's a disconnect between the way the sender's sending it and the way the recipient wants it, you end up you're going to fail in achieving your goal of getting people to listen. And this is something that will be developed much more in the final white paper that we'll get to you all. So moving on, this is another great quote. If I'm going to be sending things constantly to people around the world, I want to know that it's not going to the wrong people, or it's not going to be easily transferred into the wrong hands. And so we asked all the respondents about what was most important to them, key issues. So as you'd expect, if you can see on the right, the highest is stream quality, but then the second highest is security, but then stream ripping is the third highest, which is ultimately security, and then watermarking, embedding an inaudible watermark in the track is the last on the list. But three of those things represent quite a high proportion. So as I'm sure all of you are aware, security is an issue for a lot of people, but Johnny alluded to the fact that I did the user interviews. And the thing that really got me, so what I did was when I did the user interviews, I didn't talk, I read a script, I didn't say anything, I didn't prompt anybody to say anything. And a lot of people I noticed when they talked about security, and I said, oh, you rated security as being very high. Why is that? They didn't really seem to be exactly aware of what the consequences could be. So when you look at this quote, easily transferred into the wrong hands, they're not saying it's going to be leaked on the internet or et cetera, et cetera. It's what I thought was interesting about the security question is it's a general concern. And I, for one, think that is interesting how that mirrors how it is for most people today. That I think people do have a general concern about their life on the internet or things that are important to them on the internet, be that photos or passwords or anything like that. And so for me, that was a really interesting question that security was such a big issue. But when you ask people what security issues they had, they weren't so clear as to what those things would be.
And if I may, Mark, just say one other thing on that was something that I noticed in how they were talking about it in the interviews is it's also just sort of assumed or hoped that whatever platforms they're working with have already taken that into account and that they don't really want to have to be concerned about it. They are, but they don't really know what or how they should be concerned. So it's sort of they're expecting with that their platforms have already dealt with it or will be dealing with it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good way of articulating it. So to summarize, as I said, meeting Shawn, who is authoring the white paper based on Johnny's results, and based on all our experience in the music business, we felt that there were certain things that we had intuitively after so much time, like you all in the music business, that there were certain things that we we're pretty confident about. But what we felt was important would be, since no one's ever done research on this stuff, that it would be good to really just confirm or deny if this problem existed and get clarity on what the real issues are. And the only way to do that was to do a survey and a white paper like we've done here. But then another point that I think is super important is knowing how many talks I do at schools and talk to new artists, is to try to generate some insight and conversation about what an important issue this is, because it's just not talked about. I think everybody knows that they have challenges dealing with files and streams, but it's never talked about in the way that possibly it should be. And then just a couple final thoughts. So it was Johnny and who did the research. Shawn Reynaldo is writing the actual white paper as we speak, but then there's two people from Byta, Colin McKenzie, who's led the whole organization, and Jamie Ford, who's been involved in building the survey with Johnny. And, you know, these final thoughts come from what we've been talking about, and these came up specifically from Colin, who's been leading this whole project. And as Johnny said, the choices do seem to be very context driven. And that's a theme that, you know, I've always felt. I know Shawn felt that coming into the project. So it's fascinating to see that confirmed by the work that Johnny's done analyzing the data. But then also this idea that the mismatch between senders and receivers, one thought we had, it's more of a question ultimately, is it a communication problem? Is it an issue that senders and receivers aren't sort of synced about, you know, what their needs are? Senders want to send to things and keep it secure, but recipients need it easy to listen. So those are, I don't have an answer to that question. And I don't believe we were able to come to a conclusion about that in the information, but I think it's definitely a very important talking point. So I want to throw it open to everybody else now that we've chatted for 40 minutes and see what everybody else thinks. If anybody has any questions. I'm looking through the chat now. I can get the slides to everybody. But I wanted to know if anybody has any questions or anybody has any experience themselves that they want to talk about. Somebody's saying here, I think a platform like Byta will become essential in the near future, given the huge amount of music files shared daily through email. Well, email, this is a fascinating one. I don't think we asked any questions about email, but I was talking to someone from a very large music tech platform this week, and they talked about sharing a WAV file in an email, which is just about the kiss of death, about getting your track listened to. So you are Lucia, you're 100% correct that no matter what you're doing, you probably don't want to share files by email because it makes it very difficult for the listener to listen. Does anybody else have any questions or insights you want to get in? Again, the first in the series of those narrative pieces that Shawn wrote, they were announced today. First one's being released next week. I'll make sure everybody gets a copy of that. And then there'll be another 2 following, hopefully, I think it's the weeks after. And then I'll also make sure that everybody gets a copy of the white paper when it's released. Let me stop the chat.
Just want to chime in here first off, and one of many thank yous to both you, Marc, and Dr. Sullivan. Really appreciate your time and your insights today. Greatly appreciate, you know, this window into the music sharing landscape. You know, folks, feel free to drop any last minute questions in the chat or Q&A box. And as Marc said, with the content series coming up from Byta, be sure to also check out Music Biz's website and social channels, because we'll be sharing them via those as well.
Yeah, and big thanks to Music Biz for all the help in getting the word out about the survey. That was a great help. And Mary Martin here says, I suppose the security issue for me is that we're correctly paid. That's another key one for sure. Everybody needs to get paid. It is a massive problem. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, I'll throw my email address in the chat. And if anybody wants to hit me up, get in touch. If you want to talk privately at all, you need any more information, you have any more questions about the data, you want some detailed answers, feel free to get in touch. But other than that, it was brilliant speaking. So thanks very much for being involved.
Mark, John, thank you again so much for being here. And thank you all for attending today. Glad to have you here for the first of our fall series and webinars. And looking forward to welcoming you to the next one. I hope you all
When's the next one? Announce the next one.
2 weeks from now, Thursday, September 23rd.
And who is it? Who's doing it?
It'll be Alluvio. We're talking about music live streaming through a blockchain-based platform.
Brilliant. Okay, everybody. We'll see you at the next one, yeah? Thanks very much.
Have a great afternoon.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Henrik.